I was swept away by a wave of trust and never saw the iceberg of betrayal coming. My life with Jenna, which had once been a harmonious symphony, turned into a cacophony of dishonesty. "How could you?" I asked, my voice full of a mixture of shock and grief, but all I got in response was Jenna's deafening silence. Our previous love was torn apart by lies and secrets that wove a sinister tapestry. This is a story about truth-seeking and betrayal. Savor the trip. A 3-year-old and a separation were necessary to make me face what I had been avoiding. I had been avoiding it for as long as I could recall by turning my head away. Then, though, reality set in. My daughter Alyssa, 3, was with us as we said goodbye to my grandfather, whose heart had failed him. We were getting ready to return home at my mother's house the day after the farewell. All of the bags were prepared and placed inside the vehicle. Assisting Alyssa into her car seat was my task. "Do you want your shoes off, sweetheart?" I asked, not really interested in hearing her response because I already knew the answer. "Yes, please," she said in a direct and serious manner. I started taking off her little shoes and grinned. Her preference for walking barefoot was similar to mine in that it was more comfortable than being in stuffy, hot shoes. She wriggled her toes happily, her socks off. Knowing she would expect it and be prepared to giggle and kick in a light-hearted attempt to avoid my touch, I playfully tickled her feet. It was a small game that we both loved to play. I saw that my daughter and I were having these conversations more often. We had a stronger relationship than I did with my wife, Laura. Before I could ponder these ideas anymore, my lovely girl reminded me to live in the now. "Daddy," Alyssa interrupted my thoughts with a call. I bent down to put her shoes next to mine. To keep the socks in place, I tucked them into their respective shoes and pushed them into the seat. I whispered, "What's wrong, sweetie?" when she remained silent for a while. I met her eyes directly. She said simply, "Why doesn't Mommy love us anymore?" It shocked me. Looking at my child, I was at a loss for words. For a brief moment, I saw a light in her eyes, but it quickly disappeared. "Honey, your mommy loves us a lot, really," I said slowly. "And she loves you the most in the whole world," she said in a dejected tone, "but she didn't come with us to say bye to Grandpa. All Laura had told me was that she had work, sweetie, and I had no good response." I considered telling her about the big job at my wife's workplace and how it took up all of her time, but I decided that a 3-year-old would not be able to comprehend such a thing. I kept quiet for a while. "Mommy will be there when we get back, my love, waiting for you," I replied. Alyssa inquired, "Does she have to work at night too?" I began to tell her that her mother went out too much at night with friends, but once more, this would only lead to Alyssa asking more questions than I could handle. "No, my girl," I answered. "I think Mommy's almost done with working so much, then she'll have a lot more time for you and me." I wanted to stop this conversation right away because it was getting too difficult. Before I closed the door, I kissed my darling daughter and patted her arm, and I fastened the last buckle on the car seat. She fell asleep in the back seat while I was driving down the highway 20 minutes later. My thoughts were active while my daughter slept. Her melancholic remarks lingered in my mind. Clearly, it wasn't just me. The last time I asked my wife why she was spending so much time with her friends, she suggested this. When we arrived home, it was almost dusk. Yes, my wife Laura was there. With great excitement, Alyssa ran upstairs to tell her mother about all the cousins she had seen at my parents' house. I trailed along, my mind fixed on dark memories of our journey home. Why was my wife out with her friends or at work all the time? Laura was doing makeup in her panties when I found her by the mirror. She got up to give me a quick kiss, and suddenly I couldn't remember when she had given me a really good kiss or a tight hug to express her love. Sitting on our bed, I watched as Alyssa attempted to talk to her, but Mom didn't seem to be interested. Before long, our little girl had silently disappeared into her room. Laura continued applying makeup, determined to get it flawless. I tried to ask, "What's up, Laura?" without expressing my anger. I felt hot and my stomach knotted. It was difficult to catch my breath. "What do you mean?" she asked, her eyes still not quite right. Despite my discomfort, she continued applying makeup. She paused on her lash brush, looking irritated. "We've been home for just 10 minutes, I said in a rough voice. "And you're heading out again?" She said, sounding weary, "Baby, you know I meet the girls on Fridays." Her voice and the meaning of it didn't sit well with me. Alyssa went quiet after her mother had shut her out and was in her room, door closed. "Actually," I said, a little spiteful, "you're out with them Saturdays, some Sundays, almost every Wednesday, and nearly every Friday for happy hour." Sometimes they turned into one long, hard night. One of her toys started to play music, and I heard it. I got up, closed the bedroom door, and turned to see Laura standing there too, staring at me without making eye contact. I moved fast to get close to her and took both of her hands in mine. "Laura," I uttered slowly, attempting to maintain composure. "It wasn't supposed to break now, on this day. Alyssa asked me why you didn't love us anymore, and Laura, I have to ask too." Laura's eyes appeared to narrow slightly, indicating that I had entered a forbidden area. I continued without stopping. Do you still love me?" For a moment, I asked my 6-year wife. She leaned into me and said, "Of course, dear," softly, after going silent for a while. I felt like I was going to cry when I said, "I love you more now than when we got married." Even though my stomach was still in knots, I made an effort to relax. "Not now, though," she was happy. "Then, dear, stay home tonight," I said, dismissing my reservations. I avoided making my voice sound pleading. With a sigh, Laura touched me and patted my chest. I said, "We could get Alyssa in bed early. Turn down the lights and bring out that wine we've been saving. And you can wear that black lace top I got you for Valentine's Day. How about that?" Until I said that, her body had strangely seemed into my idea. Then she stiffened and attempted to back away. I held onto her wrists, making sure she couldn't go very far. I purposefully asked, "Laura, are you seeing someone else?" as I spoke, and sure enough, she was. I noticed a slight tightening at the corners of her eyes and a sudden change in her gaze. Then, in an instant, they vanished. However, I did see them. A sharp breath caught my attention as she inhaled quickly. I could still feel the quick pulse beneath my fingertips. My first 2 fingers were on her primary bloodline, and I was holding her wrists. Better than any lie detector, in fact. Back then, I was aware. My wife said, "Don't be silly," with honey flowing from her voice. She stepped closer, rested her head on my shoulder, breathed softly on my neck, and gave me a few quick kisses. "I could only love you. You know that." Her head didn't come down hard enough to tangle her hair, though. Was Laura feeling the chill that was coursing through me? Laura tapped my arms, took a step back, and glanced at the bedside clock. "I'm running late," she remarked. "I promised my friends I wouldn't be again, and I need to go." "But maybe tomorrow night," she said softly. "Laura, we need time together," I said, displaying my irritation. "Tell your friends another time and stay with me and our kid. How about that, please?" I made an effort. She proceeded to her wardrobe and removed a short skirt. Sharply, "I can't let my friends down," she uttered. She yelled, "Why would you do that?" I shot back, "Why would you let me and your kid down? Don't we matter to you?" Like me, my wife's eyes grew piercing when she became enraged. "Tomorrow," she cried out. "Damn it, I need my own time without you always there and making me feel trapped. I'm not your slave." We had more fights. In this marriage, she claimed, she was her own person. After a difficult day at work, I told her that I couldn't control her and that she was free to unwind and enjoy herself. I told her that I always let her pursue her interests, as evidenced by the fact that she returned to work after our baby was born. Even though I was earning enough money for us, I was all for it. Her work at the accounting firm made me proud. However, I failed to understand why her nights out took precedence over ours. She became even more agitated when I became a little critical of her friends. She inquired as to what I was accusing her of. I then turned to leave. I took to the couch in the living room to calm down because I was too angry to say anything I would later regret. I was furious and wanted to stop her from going, but I knew I couldn't. We both just looked at each other when she descended. She appeared prepared for a fight, and I felt horrible. "Laura," I uttered, my tone wavering and deep. She hesitated, as if she would stay. Then she was gone. "Laura," I yelled once more forcefully. "I love you. Please don't do this to me and Alyssa," Laura said, looking at me with an expressionless face. She then firmly shut the door behind her after passing through it. Running through the foyer and down the stairs was Alyssa. As she unlocked the external door, she observed her mother's Lexus's headlights vanishing from view across the road. She closed the door behind her without a word and hurried over to the couch. That walk was familiar to me. She couldn't stand how hot the marble floor felt. Hoping her mother would return, she leaped onto the couch next to me and peered out the door. I also took a look. I took Alyssa to the kitchen to make some sandwiches after she climbed onto my lap, and we gave each other a long hug. Between Laura and me, the weekend was chilly and difficult. She was so drunk when she returned late at night that she was hurt by even the smallest sound. Melissa and I went to the park after she became a bit mean, and we didn't return until after supper. Laura took offense at that. When Alyssa and I got back, she yelled at me, calling me a bad person for leaving her. After hearing for a while, I became impatient. I told her that leaving her child behind and going out was her fault. I told her to deal with it, get used to the idea of Alyssa and I having fun without her. I told her straight out, be kind or shut up. Laura was shocked. I had never talked to her like that. She softened later, but that night she was quieter and nicer to Alyssa. Laura had to stop when she felt sick, despite my attempts to get closer. On Sunday, I gave it another go, but Laura didn't answer, so I gave up and just lay there indignant. I took a shower after a while in the hopes that it would help me fall asleep. It was not very helpful. I departed from home on Monday morning before Laura woke. For one thing, it meant Laura had to wake Alyssa, get her ready, feed her, and take her to daycare, which made it unusual for me. That wasn't to my wife's liking unless she was all set up. She was over 30 minutes late for work as a result. That day, I didn't feel like making things simple for Laura. I went down to the basement that morning before leaving, opened a locker that appeared to be for random tools, and flipped a switch to activate a small device that recorded every call made from our home phone. An apparatus that would record any cell calls made within 150 feet was activated by a second switch. Although it wasn't precisely lawful, nobody was aware of it. I would never use the information that was discovered in court. After I saw a TV show about how they used footage from inside a house to solve a murder, we already had cameras in almost every room. I covered them all. Observing any babysitters was another justification. In addition to the cleaner who came in 3 times a week, Laura and I got to watch our child. On the evenings Laura and I went out, we trusted the cleaner and the teenage girls we had the pleasure of watching for a short while. But it seemed right to me to trust and inquire. It was months since we'd needed a babysitter. I questioned whether the costly security system was worthwhile. I drove around the new location and to the office on the other side of the large, razor-wire-topped fence. When we received our first major contract from the Department of Defense 3 years ago, the fence and razor wire were installed. Subsequently, the Department of Defense returned twice for smaller but profitable deals. I parked my car in a large space and turned it off. Indecisive, I sat there trying to think. Although my head told me I had no solid evidence, I had the feeling Laura was hiding something. I took deep, rapid breaths, but it wasn't enough to calm my racing heart. She seemed guilty to me, but perhaps it had nothing to do with the question I had asked her specifically. I really hoped so. I was startled out of my reverie when I noticed that the logo in front of my car was covered. As I opened the door, I looked up and greeted one of my first employees, Phil Sanders. I greeted her quickly and then reached into the back seat to retrieve my briefcase and Palm Pilot. I noticed the eye-catching logo. That is my responsibility. I am 34-year-old Mark Archer, the CEO and boss of a small business that started out making tools 12 years ago. We have located the ideal location for moving and rotating home security camera mounts. We search diligently for detective agencies in need of high-quality espionage equipment. We gathered a solid clientele over time who came to rely on us for premium remote control mounts. We acquired a small company 8 years ago that produced excellent color cameras with a large zoom. Tinier than a woman's lipstick, the entire device consisted of a powerful broadcaster and a separate receiver that could be connected to any TV. Now that my little business had everything, we began selling our products throughout the state with plans to expand online. Subsequently, we integrated several detective agencies into a single division we called Info and Watch Partners. We had opened up shop in 3 more cities in a year. MA Industries was operating profitably and remaining unnoticed. I signed documents my secretary, who served as a sort of task boss, gave me in my office without carefully reading them. They just needed my sign, and it was a daily occurrence. I enjoy making jokes with her, sometimes referring to her as Radar. Maggie was the life of our office. She would snap back at me, saying, "Colonel Potter," to watch what I was doing. Things weren't going as well without her, and I dreaded the day she would tell me she was going away. I paid her the same as the vice presidents of the company to try to keep her around as long as possible. That secret was known to her. When she brought me my first cup of coffee of the day, I asked, "Maggie, can you get Carl Winters to see me?" She seemed perplexed. "May I ask why?" she inquired. I shook my head at first, but then changed my mind. I thought I should have given her a hint. From the beginning in our previous location, Maggie was like a mother to me. I said to her slowly, not looking into her eyes, "Just say I need to be his client." She held back. "Oh dear," she murmured. She sniffed and rushed out, saying, "I'm so sorry, Mark." I was curious about her guess. Carl oversaw our detective and spy operations. Maggie recognized the seriousness of my need to speak with him as a client. "What's up, Mark?" Carl interrupted. I waved him to close the oak door. As he sipped his first cup of tea from the large cup Maggie had made for him when he arrived, I sat there staring at nothing. I opened my mouth to say, "Carl," but had to pause to clear my throat. Similar to my tense muscles in my stomach, it was difficult to let go of the constricted feeling there. "They hurt, Carl. I need to tell you. I'm scared Laura's getting into something bad she'll regret later," I said softly. I was trying to be careful with my words, not wanting to admit that I suspected she was seeing someone else behind my back. "Mark," he uttered, his face dejected. He said to me, "Damn, I'm sorry to hear that." We both inhaled deeply. Carl placed his mug on the corner of my desk and remained silent, focusing only on his fingernails. Like you, I had no idea what to say. After a protracted, awkward silence, he said, Well, we've got all we need to check things out for sure. I can get some temp workers to cover for our guys so they can focus on this. Can you tell me Laura's work hours, her cell number, computer logins, credit card info, stuff like that?" I replied. Carl wanted the best people on this project, so I started to say no to using our own people instead of hiring outside help. With a sigh, I leaned over my desk and drew my briefcase nearer. I had devoted most of Sunday to jotting down account numbers and other information from documents Laura and I had that I knew he would require. I had Carl set me up as a paying client of Information and Surveillance Associates. I'd pay that part of my company out of my personal bank account. It was a small thing, but it would keep the account checkers happy. We talked about how to quietly watch my wife to see where she went, who she met, and what they did. I felt silly for doing it, and that was dumb, in addition to the fact that I had understood on Friday night that I had been gradually becoming further distant from Laura's adoration. The pain that I had experienced over the past weekend made it imperative that I address this matter honestly. If Laura was not doing anything that could be considered detrimental to the marriage, she would never be aware of what I was doing. There were things that I needed to know. Also, I may find a way to recommend that we seek the assistance of a marriage counselor in order to find a solution to whatever problem she was struggling with. What I wanted to know by midday was whether or not she was engaging in behavior that is inappropriate for a married lady. I needed to know this information right away. People belonging to Carl's group had broken into Laura's Lexus, which was parked in the office building downtown where she worked. The task wasn't tough. I then handed over my key to them because my name was also on the title. Under the driver's seat, they placed the sound-powered microphone they had purchased. Within a radius of 1 meter, it might pick up the signal transmitted by the little transmitter. On its own, the microphone was sensitive enough to pick up even a whisper coming from within a soundproof automobile. A GPS transmitter was situated in a concealed area of the trunk and instantly started transmitting the vehicle's location, exact to within a few feet of the target. The investigation was being handled by 7 of Carl's most talented employees, and he had committed 5 vehicles to the endeavor to ensure that the rental automobiles and vans would not break down if needed. Our in-house mechanics inspected each one. The majority of them, one more female and a freelancer with outstanding credentials, submitted her application for a position at Laura's accounting firm. She was anticipated to begin working there the following week. Carl's advice to me was to relax and let him handle everything on his own because there were previously established protocols to deal with situations like this one. It was in my best interest to refrain from getting involved for the time being. That made me feel even more depressed. What if she was having an affair with another man? In light of the fact that it was such a banal and unremarkable matter, there were already established protocols to deal with it. Also, he informed me that I had an option. They might make an effort to break up a tryst that is about to take place if they learned about it. If my intention was to do so, or if we were to delay our actions to acquire a large number of photographs and videos for a divorce proceeding, I made the decision to halt any assignment that they discovered the assignment for. I didn't have to give it any thought at all. I desired to have my wife back. After nodding, he requested that I make every effort to avoid disrupting Laura's routine. When we reached a point where we needed to make a decision, he would let me know. Instead, I informed him that a cusp had already arrived and would soon be leaving. I made a phone call to him from the basement that evening. After listening to the recordings obtained from the mobile phone intercept, we realized that the material obtained at that time was not legal. Nonetheless, we did not anticipate using it in court. On the second ring, Carl responded to the call. "Carl, I inquired about it." He was able to pick up on the fact that my voice was thick with emotion very instantly. "Holy cow," he said. "What has taken place?" It was clear that he was concerned about one thing. In an effort to regain control of myself, I took a deep breath and held it for a little period of time. "You are aware of the landline and cell phone intercepts that I was required to install when we were building the house, right?" I inquired about it. "It's true. Despite our best efforts, we were unable to travel to that location today in order to set up the remote monitoring equipment." "It is true, Carl." "Are you sure that there are only 26 hours in a day?" "Regardless, Carl, you shouldn't give it any thought at all. Around 7 o'clock, I have a recording of a conversation that took place between Laura and a man named Brian. I extracted a ragged lung full of air and proceeded with my work. My guess is that you will be able to hear it for yourself as of tomorrow." However, Brian referenced the son of a witch when he said that he would soon be screwing Laura's brains out once more. Even though I wanted to cry, I refused to allow tears to gather in my eyes. A ball of ice began to develop in the bottom of my stomach, and I was unable to stop it from happening. I had the sense that my entire body was made of wood, as if I were encircled by tremendous layers of cotton that numbed every sensation. It stung in my chest. I was unable to take a breath when I found out that Laura was having sexual relations with another man. I was confused. She went outside the marriage for sex, and I couldn't think of any explanation I could have provided her for doing so. I was perplexed as to why she would act in such a manner, betraying both me and our daughter. Even so, I made an effort to swallow the lump that was in my throat. "My statement to you, Carl, is that when I have sufficient control that shifts our attention in the morning of tomorrow, I will give Pete a call and initiate the process of divorce proceedings for Laura. At this point, I believe that what we need to do is collect as much evidence as we possibly can. Pete Robinson was a high-powered attorney who was on retainer for M Industries and also served as my personal attorney. Her name was Peter Robinson. I agree with you, Mark, and I suppose there isn't much else that we can do. In a manner that was slow and hesitant, Carl spoke his remarks. His words were, "I am just so sorry. I am so sorry that I am at a loss for words to express how sorry I am." It was his empathy that he told me helped some. My response was, "Yeah, I know, Carl," and I raised the volume of my voice somewhat. "Thank you very much, partner, but the credit goes to Laura. It is not the fault of anyone else. On the other hand, I have a young girl who is going to be utterly heartbroken. We are the victims, both she and I, when it comes to Laura's actions. I am completely perplexed." I concentrated my concentration on the task at hand. It was not my intention to play the role of the long-suffering husband. Beyond this moment of singleness and melancholy, okay, so I just wanted to let you know that we are going to be moving in a different path, and that change will take effect immediately. I informed him that I will be in the office tomorrow morning. Is that okay with you? Certainly it is, Mark, he was in agreement. Hey, tonight is the time to relax, all right? Don't do anything that you'll come to regret. Boss, sincerely, he stated it when he warned me not to do anything that could cause my wife physical damage. I knew he was serious. Yes, Carl, I am fine. I informed him that I had run the tape on this intercept 3 hours ago, and that I am already well over that point. I paused for a little moment. I am going to inform you, Carl, that I will not be sleeping with her tonight or any other night in the future. I will have to come up with an excuse, but at the same time, I will not sleep with a woman who stabs me in the back, whether it be literally or symbolically. There are things that I am able to do and others that I am not able to do, no matter how much I know it will complicate the investigation. I just can't do it. The final words I spoke were delivered with a crack in my voice, but Carl did not comment on it. He said in a reassuring tone, "That's okay. Those who are engaging in activities of this nature always have the misconception that they are more intelligent than the rest of us, Mark. Even though it may take a little bit longer, despite the fact that they are under the impression that they are able to conceal their adultery from their partner as well as the rest of the world, they are completely unaware that their behavior is predictable and relatively simple to trace." I did not make any statements. "Don't give up, boss. You made it this far," Carl said, "that everything will turn out well in the end, irrespective of the manner in which it is handled. Can you hear me? You are going to emerge from this experience more powerful than you were when you first entered it. Is that okay?" "Whichever way you look at it," I said, "yeah, I will do that." On the other hand, I did not believe it. When I looked into the future, all I could see was a black pit filled with shame and agony for both my daughter and me. This was going to give her a great deal of emotional distress, and I hadn't even begun to think about it. "All right, Mark, please give me a call if there is anything you require my assistance with." "All right, talk to me, even if it's simply a verbal exchange." "All right, my cell phone has an off button," and I told him that I would press it immediately in order to record any further communications that may have taken place between my beloved wife and whoever it was that she was deceiving. I reactivated the intercept device on that particular night. I slept in a guest bedroom located down the hall, and I informed Laura that I was suffering from a dry throat and some congestion that could perhaps cause me to snore severely. This was a swift and unremarkable agreement from her. Also, I told her that it would be closer to and if she might require one of us in the night. On top of that, the fact that our young child had soiled the bed a couple of times the previous week was news to Laura, but she shrugged her shoulders and went back to reading her magazine. Despite the fact that I noticed the emotional difficulties that our daughter was going through, Laura did not seem to be affected by it. A preliminary report was brought to my attention by Carl. It was Brian C.R. who was Laura's sexual companion. The following afternoon, at the same workplace where Laura worked, there was one of the former spouses who worked in accounting. In addition to Laura, he was one of the 3 supervisors of the division. He had a daughter who was 7 years old and a son who was 9 years old. He was married up to that point. Pamela, his wife, worked as a part-time insurance agent in an office located on the opposite side of town. I was 38 years old, and Brian was a little taller than I was, but he was quite a little shorter when I was in my early teens. I participated in the Golden Gloves organization as an amateur boxer. Concurrently, I began training weights in order to enhance the power of my upper body and the endurance of my legs. Despite the fact that I stopped boxing when I went to college, I continued to lift weights on a number of occasions each week. Based on the one photograph that Carl had discovered up to this point, it seemed as though Mr. Collier was more of a runner, if he was even an athlete at all. Although I was unaware of what women thought to be handsome, I had a hunch that he would be attractive to the average woman, but not particularly so in general. Honestly, I wasn't all that impressed. I was not sure if it was because of him that Laura would be tempted to disobey our wedding vows in such a blatant manner and me to have sexual relations with this jerk. Carl had bribed a contact he had with the phone company in order to obtain a complete 2-year history of Laura's phone records. Some of his employees had rapidly gone through them. Initially, there were only a few phone calls between the two, and they were made at times that were very far apart. According to the findings of the first analysis, the calls had started to become a weekly occurrence a little less than 6 months ago, and soon they became a daily occurrence instead. Currently, they were happening 2 or 3 times a day, most frequently in the wee hours of the morning or late at night. Carl was aware of the time when I arrived at work, and he informed me absolutely that the two were having a conversation when I left the house in the morning almost every single time. The calls that took place in the evening were virtually always initiated by Laura, and they were unquestionably made at times when Laura could be certain I wouldn't overhear, but it was probably when I was working out in the basement with my kid keeping me company. When it came to my typical workout periods, the timing was just about perfect. Do you have any information that you might share with me regarding what took place around the time when the number of phone calls started to increase? Carl inquired about it. In regard to everything, he was acting in a very businesslike manner, and I admired that. From my perspective, it made the process of dealing with it a little bit simpler. When Carl noticed that I was beginning to relax a little bit, he joined me in doing the same thing on the other side of the desk. I sat back in my chair to ponder, and I even rested my feet up on the near-center corner of my desk. It dawned on me all of a sudden, or perhaps not at all, a couple of weeks prior to that, she attended a training conference in Chicago with a corporation that had engaged her firm to audit their financial records. The seminar was provided by the company, I stated with apprehension. I was able to recall more of it as I continued to think about it. As I mentioned earlier, during the time that I was pausing, a piece of a memory began to form into something that I could visualize in my head. During that time, I accompanied Laura to the airport. It was a sluggish voice. This other individual was also present, and he was boarding the same plane. I am able to recall it as clearly as a trumpet. "All right," said Carl with self-assurance. "Despite the fact that I will have my family continue their search for another nexus, I believe that we will discover that the seminar was the initial event that led to this entire disaster. Quite a few indicators are pointing in that direction." I gave a slight nod. Even though I am a guy, I do not believe in the concept of coincidences. It was Carl who checked his notepad. "It's all for the time being, boss," as he stated. A digital copy of all the action that occurred over the course of the previous year was emailed to us by the credit card issuers. The fact that you and Laura have jointly created accounts on each of them is beneficial. I am reminded of that. In the later part of today, we will also be looking at your bank records to determine whether or not there is anything there. I will keep you updated on what we discover next. All right, the amount of material that had already been amassed, both in terms of its breadth and depth, left an impression on me. It had only been a little over 2 days since they had begun working on the case. "What was your method for obtaining all of that without my permission?" I inquired about it. I pondered whether or not it was truly appropriate for me to raise a fuss with the banks and phone providers on the ease with which they released private information. Carl wore a grin. "What do you think about all of that?" It was said by him. I allowed my eyebrows to raise in a curious manner. It was a chuckle. "In the event that Maggie places a pile of documents in front of you, boss, you have no idea what you are signing." A smile was required of me, and I had to keep it from falling off my face. When I was younger, I used to declare that I trusted Maggie even more than I trusted my wife. The top spot was now occupied by Maggie. All right, as I raised my hands in a gesture of submission, I said, "Proceed to engage in combat with the malevolent individuals and females." By Thursday, I had informed him, Carl and his team had amassed a big mountain of information about my wife and her new partner. Several detectives had been dispatched to Chicago, and they'd already turned up a half-dozen people at the company organizing the seminars who remembered Laura and Brian as being quite close before they learned that they had different surnames. One of the desk clerks, who had been a witness to most of their shenanigans, had been under the impression that they were married to each other. A further 3 or 4 others who were staying at the hotel where Laura and Brian were staying described them as frequent visitors to the lounge, where they appeared to consume a significant amount of alcoholic beverages. Evidently, they would stumblingly make their way to the elevator and then ascend to either one of the rooms. On 2 separate instances, the management of the lounge had to request that they reduce the risky activity that they were engaging in during the early hours of the morning. 2 investigators working for Carl stated that they were in the process of negotiating with the management of the hotel to determine whether or not the security camera tapes from that time period were still available, and whether or not they could be obtained for a cost that was reasonable. That was a euphemism for an underhanded transfer of recordings for greenbacks, Carl explained to me with a grin. He was referring to the transaction. I gave a slight nod because of the way he spoke. I was able to comprehend that his freelance operative had been called in for a brief assignment in Laura's office considerably earlier than intended, and she was immediately reporting that Brian and Laura were an item around the office. This was a significant development. It would appear that their shared employer was aware of the situation as well, and he had cautioned them on multiple occasions to keep their affair confidential within the office. According to the information provided, Laura had previously lost a merit rise on her income as a result of a poor performance report that was based on her behavior. I stored the information in my memory. My legal representative would be interested in hearing about a company that did not take significant action to prevent patently obvious violations of the morals clauses that were inserted into the contracts of its employees. While working in the payroll department, the freelancer had already received copies of Laura and Mr. Kerr's pay records, as well as information regarding their time and attendance. At first glance, it seemed as though the dynamic duo was going to schedule a meeting for 1 or 2 afternoons per week. The credit card information that Carl received from our bank revealed that it appeared Bree Sr. was also a slacker. This was due to the fact that Laura paid for the majority of the rooms at an economy hotel located on the outskirts of town. From my perspective, that was a clear indication of how cheap and disgusting their affair was. Even a respectable hotel in the downtown area was unable to accommodate their gathering. The small circle of girlfriends that Laura claimed she was going to meet when she went out at night was mostly made up of women who had just divorced or were unmarried and were definitely looking for men. All of them, with the exception of a woman named Kathy, had taken an oath given by Laura to keep the information a secret. We are conveying a great deal of information to Carl's investigators while also speaking quickly. It was all that was required for the majority of them to provide dates, locations, and even an estimated time when Laura and Brian would hook up. All it needed was $100. As if that were a coincidence, however, as of late, even that fictional work had been rejected. In the past 2 months, the majority of the females had not seen Laura. "I am Kathy." A call was sent to Laura very immediately, and she was informed that she had been questioned by an unknown individual regarding her involvement with the group. Laura was adamant that she had not disclosed even the slightest amount of information about the situation. It would have been appropriate to bind Kathy. She believed that it was ridiculous, vindictive, and cruel of me to check up on Laura, who was a close friend of hers. The assumption that she made that it was me was correct in terms of logic. I was the person to suspect. Kathy, of course, had a great deal of experience in things of this nature, but her knowledge is still lacking. Inquiry into the history of Kathy revealed that she had been divorced twice before due to the fact that she had witnessed her husband cheating with his secretary. In addition, the second time was due to the fact that her new husband discovered her with the plumber. Kathy had been a man who had wandered from man to man over the course of her life. She was identified as a correspondent in divorce lawsuits on 2 separate instances, 2 of which were situations in which she went out of her way to seduce the husbands. In spite of the fact that she did not even work in the same building as the other people, this woman had managed to inadvertently become a member of the same group as my wife. At the very least, it appeared like Kathy was supporting the affair to some degree just because she had the ability to do so. In addition, we were aware that Carl had cloned Laura's mobile phone, which was the reason why the bribes of $100 were still being held with the other women. Kathy had offered Laura the promise that they would genuinely give her up, and the other girls reacted to Laura's terrified calls with assurances that they would do the same thing. The idea never occurred to Laura. In reality, the only thing that Laura was aware of was that someone was inquiring about her, but her friends were all working together to keep her secret a secret. I was once again astounded by the amount of information that Carl's operation had created in such a short period of time, both in terms of its number and its quality. She thought it goes without saying that Brian and Laura were the most amateurish of the bunch, while Carl was the epitome of a professional. There was no prospect for Brian and Laura to succeed. The other days of that week as well as the following 2 were rather peaceful in our house. The ladies went out to a couple of clubs and danced for a time with pretty much anyone who asked, according to Carl's representatives, who confirmed that Laura had canceled virtually all of her plans for a night out on the town, with the exception of Friday. After that, everyone went straight back to their homes. When Brian was a young lad, he was a gentleman who stayed at home with his wife and children. I heard a report that claimed Brian's wife wasn't all that delighted to have him home, and she had been rather vocal while questioning about his abrupt change of behavior. I discovered this information after reading the story. I was really taken aback by the fact that the investigators' questioning of the girls in the small group had such a quick and insignificant impact. On the other hand, I received the impression that Laura and Brian's attitude toward me was characterized by a certain degree of arrogance. On the other hand, they have been running strong for such a long time, regardless of what it was. Shortly after 3 weeks had passed since the detectives had made contact with the party, the mobile phone intercepts that occurred on Friday nights began to become more frequent and explicit. Both of the cheating spouses had come to the conclusion that everything had been resolved, and they also came to the conclusion that I had reached the conclusion that there was nothing going on during this time period. The spare bedroom was nearly totally occupied by me at that point. When I tried to kiss Laura on the cheek, I could hardly stand up. Upon my return to my house in the evening, I realized that there was no way I could ever have sexual relations with her. She made a number of hints that she was amenable to some passionate sex throughout the conversation, but I chose to ignore her. I read every book that Alyssa had in her small collection, and after I had perfected a hard-sounding dry cough, I went out and purchased additional books for us to read together. There was no question in Laura's mind about why I was sleeping apart from her. On the other hand, Laura never once mentioned that I should avoid being around the infant when I was coughing like that. On the other hand, Carl and his team saw that the number of late-night chats that took place between the 2 on their cell phones had significantly increased. The meeting between Laura and Brian was scheduled to take place at their typical low-cost motel on the Wednesday of the 3rd week. As a result of Carl's efforts, everyone was eagerly anticipating the opportunity to obtain information about the adulterers, and Pete, my attorney, had me prepared and ready to take action. I was able to secure the services of Mandy, a 16-year-old girl from the neighborhood, to watch Alyssa. It was that evening. "It's Laura, please do not go out tonight," I pleaded with her when she was leaving the house. I was standing in the living room just as she was leaving. "I begged you, Laura, to not do it." I was not acting in any way. It was very important to me that she not get into contact with that son of a witch out there and beat him, I said. "It's Mark." Laura became enraged at me as she came to the realization that she could not depart without making an attempt to placate me. The expression on her face changed. Look, there is absolutely nothing going on, Mark. The only thing I'm going to do is go out for a couple of drinks and maybe even some dancing. That was the only thing she said, and her face was one of innocence. But I knew better. When she returned, she gave me a hug and looked me in the eyes with a sincere expression, all the while attempting to persuade me that I was wrong about something that I knew for a certainty she was about to do. In a moment of impulsiveness, I responded to Laura by saying, I am aware that you are going to meet someone tonight, but you cannot possibly mean as much to him as you do to Alyssa and me. I beg you, sweetie, to stay here. After taking a step back, Laura let go of me. All of a sudden, she became suspicious. I need to know what the hell you are talking about. Are you angry? She inquired. It was necessary for me to hand it to her. She had grown into a talented actress over the years. It is merely that I insisted on it. I am aware that you are having an affair with another person. You are not only doing this to me, but you are also doing this to Alyssa. Moreover, not one of us is being treated fairly by this. I voiced my opposition. She relaxed just a little bit. Clearly, her line of reasoning was that if I did not reveal a name, all I had were suspicions about the person at hand. She asserted in a forceful tone, I am not cheating on you. I am beginning to feel a little worn out by all of these charges, and it is high time that we put an end to them. The warning came from her. You continue to do this, damn you. Additionally, I might go hire a strange man to take care of my demands so that I can demonstrate them to you. I had to turn my gaze away. If she had seen the sudden anger that was visible in my eyes, I would have blown everything. It's Laura, as I stated. Lease is broken. The task was not tough because of the rage that I was experiencing. It was difficult for me to communicate. Not another damned word, she yelled out in a resolute whisper. I have never done so, I am not at this moment, and I promise that I will never screw any other man than you around. There, does that fulfill your needs? With rage, with a light jacket draped over her shoulders, she turned around and headed toward the entrance of the room. I was able to see that she was not wearing a bra, and I was also able to see that her miniskirt did not have any panty lines. Teresa, I said with a little more composure, there will be no more marriage between us if you ever cheat on me. You are aware of that, right? Infidelity and the damage it does to couples were topics of discussion when Georgia and Sam ended their relationship a year ago. Take time to focus on this. There was no movement on the doorknob from Laura's hand. I have informed you, despite the fact that she claimed that her voice was controlled, I could hear a tone of condescension in it. I solemnly vow that I have no desire for any man but you, and I will never do it. It was with a forceful tone that she remarked, now I'm late, and I've got to go, and she did not even bother to look back at me. First, she opened the door, and then departed. 20 minutes later, I joined Carl and 3 of his best friends in the room next to where Brian and Laura would soon be, a little terrified by my protest this evening as well as the suspicious questioning of Laura's pals in weeks past. I was there because I was concerned about whether or not they would react to my protest. It would appear that Brian and Laura were driving about aimlessly, looking for anyone who might be following them. The GPS gadgets alerted us to the fact that, in reality, neither of them had anyone following after them. Just a minute or two after the reservation was made at the motel, Carl was aware of it. This was due to the fact that the desk clerk had been compensated a couple $100s to phone when the reservation was made. Owing to the fact that we were aware of their final destination, there was no justification for following them. It is possible that it may have been done if only we had been aware of their final destination without the GPS instruments that were installed in both of their vehicles. Carl would have needed to use a half-dozen autos in order to keep up with Laura and her buddy while they were driving parallel roadways. Due to the fact that I had only been there for a brief period of time, neither of the two would have ever seen their followers. Laura and Brian drove up to the motel in their cars practically simultaneously and parked in front of room 113. The motel had an external entry that led to all of the rooms, so all that was required of the couple of loves was to exit their automobiles and walk a few steps to reach the entrance. Both of them failed to see the dark vent that was located across the street. It was completely unknown to them that a high-end digital camera was recording their every action. In addition to deeply kissing each other and rubbing their bodies all over each other, Laura and Brian put their arms around each other and kissed each other passionately. "There was a close watch on me from Carl," he said in a low voice. "Before this is over, things are going to get a great deal worse. If you are able to endure this, are you sure?" After sitting back down on one of the double beds, I licked my lips, which had suddenly become dry. "Are you in possession of anything to drink?" I inquired about it. He was confused and shook his head in indifference. "No," he said. At the same time, he offered me a small yellow tablet of Valium and stated, "I believe you should take this Valium," he said it in a soothing tone. "It will help calm your nerves." It was something that I accepted, and after that, I went and took a soft drink from the cooler that he had brought with him. Carl was successful in attempting to conceal a high-end digital camera within the room by concealing it behind the vent of the air conditioning system. It possessed a full range of motion through an arc that was 160 degrees from side to side and 85 degrees up and down. It was also in full color over its entire existence. Moreover, it featured a zoom capability of 25 times, which enabled it to single out a single hair in the nose of each of these two individuals. Not that Carl anticipated this level of specificity being required in any way. As soon as the two individuals entered the building, the action began practically instantly. In accordance with my suspicions, Laura had not worn any undergarments or a bra, and she had removed her clothes in a matter of seconds when the two of them collapsed into the bed. Brian was not too far after. After we had shut out all of the lights in our room, two of Carl's men went out into the night. The camera and the air conditioning vent were not the only things that Carl had brought with him. He had brought several fiber optic snake cameras. The first one was concealed beneath the door that led to Laura's room, while the second one was positioned on top of the door. A diameter of less than 4 inches and a length of only a couple of inches were the dimensions of the cameras. The transmitter and antenna were left outdoors since they were able to slide through the gaps between the door and the frame quite effortlessly. At the point where the cameras were positioned in the manner that the men desired under the cover of darkness, they attached the transmitters to the wall on the outside. In order to further emphasize this point, the dark-colored spy gadgets were invisible from a distance greater than a couple of feet. Before going back inside, the boys removed the screws from the one and only lamp that was located outside, which was close enough to illuminate the area. After ensuring that the receivers were properly connected to the monitors and recording equipment, we proceeded to resume our preparations for the performance. There was a belief that if one camera failed to capture something, the other two cameras would definitely catch it. In all honesty, there wasn't much of a show at all. Without a single bit of foreplay, kindness, or affection, there was absolutely none. Following the insertion of a condom with a yellowish hue, Brian proceeded to mount my wife while she was in a missionary position and then continued to drill away. I focused my attention on her face for a little moment. As for the creases that appeared on her forehead, I was unsure if they were the result of anguish or ecstasy. After observing for a minute or two, I claimed that SB isn't any bigger than me. Damn, I could have been wrong. To hell with it. He's not even close to being as big as I am. I voiced my opposition. Can you believe it? It was accurate when we first got married. Laura had been in a hurry to get a measurement of me, and she had used a ruler on me on multiple occasions. By that point, it was through her girlfriends that Laura was able to determine that my size was on the higher end of the average range. During the time that we were making love, she started shouting out to me and demanding that I drill her with my enormous tool. Not much of that had been done by us as of late. I suppose I was aware of the reason, but on the other hand, I didn't really do it. It was clear that Brian was on the lower end of the average, and he had to exert a lot of effort in order to provide Laura with any type of excitement. Furthermore, the creep has the technology of a hog that was roving around in a barnyard. What in the hell was Laura doing when she went to see this guy? It was possible to partially redeem my pride sometime after that. To my great relief, I was able to catch Sherry, one of Carl's representatives, glancing at my crotch. After some time had passed, she looked up at the television displays and shook her head in dissonance. It was a smile. I was under the impression that I could see a hint of uncertainty in her eyes. We each turned our gaze away. The fact that she was employed by me meant that I was not going to mess about in my own backyard. However, she was adorable, as the saying goes. It's possible that she wouldn't always stay with me. It was going to be a bed that was going to become available mate a few times after that. I departed. Nothing further could be seen at that point. The fight between Brian and Laura would last for a while, take a break, and then try it again. As for Laura, what exactly did she see in this Yahoo? Moreover, why did she choose to have sexual relations with him after she had been married for 6 years? There was a week that passed before the two adulterers finally met, and by that time, they were both more than a little frustrated with a world that kept them apart. It appeared that their schedules were not aligning very well for a change, and they were at a loss for what to do about the situation for the time being. At some point, Kathy approached Laura with a proposition, suggesting that she and AG take a trip to Las Vegas for the next weekend. The team that was conducting the investigation had a comprehensive file on Kathy. At this point, they had discovered a mountain of information regarding her. I am Kathy. In all appearances, she was a woman who was incredibly cruel. In a phone call, her friends understood that she was resentful and that she had become estranged from her parents and siblings as a result of her previous infidelity. The team of Carl was keeping an eye on neither of them on the basis of her earlier suggestion. Kathy elaborated in a Kalen contest that was being broadcast on the radio. Kathy had won too many free tickets to Vegas, and she had invited Laura to accompany her on her trip. She wanted Laura to tell me about it. After listening to the recording of the phone call, it became abundantly evident to everyone that Kathy was suggesting that Laura and she should be the sole ones to go on a trip to Sin City. Simply expressed, the objective was to engage in sexual activity as frequently as possible. She informed Laura that she had purchased 20 condoms with the intention of using each and every one of them. However, she put a wrench into Kathy's plans by immediately calling Brian and encouraging him to come along. Laura was swiftly won over, but she did this by calling Brian. After receiving the news, in a later phone call, Kathy's tone conveyed that she was dissatisfied with the fact that Brian would be joining them there, but she did not raise any objection. According to what I learned, Brian was responsible for paying his own way. I couldn't help but think what a cheap man he was. Because of the snippy quality of his last phone call before he left, he didn't appear to appreciate that much. And I couldn't escape the thought that he was a cheap man. His idea was that Laura ought to foot the bill for his journey out there so that he could take advantage of her. What a miracle. It's Pete. My attorney informed me that he was going to add Kathy to the list of individuals whom he would serve with subpoenas. By persuading Laura to spend the weekend in Las Vegas, she was well aware of the fact that both Laura and Brian were married, and she had been aware of this for a considerable amount of time. She was playing the role of a facilitator throughout the entire baffling affair. Pete did not believe that she had any money that he could extract from her possession. Even if the litigation were to be brought before civil courts, he did not believe it would be successful. On the other hand, he was going to instill a sense of dread in her as soon as he was finished with her. He stated that she would never, ever consider assisting in the dissolution of the marriage of another couple. We talked about whether or not to put an end to this situation with simply the tape from the motel or whether or not to wait until the prearranged trip to Vegas. The intrigue, the lying, and the dishonesty were all things that I was considering putting an end to right now. And I was also considering starting the divorce process on Laura right away. We ought to provide them with a little bit more rope so that they may hang themselves, Pete thought, as he phrased it. The trip outside of the state, along with all of the lies and misrepresentations that would accompany it, would be the turning point in their lives. It would have a particularly significant impact if Laura showed a particularly egregious lack of regard for the promises she made during her marriage. Lawyers have a humorous way of speaking. What he desired was to witness her crossing the boundary, whether it was through words or actions. As they transpired, both were obtained by him. While Kathy, Brian, and Laura were staying at the casino hotel, the detectives were also present in the same hotel. They were located in one of the two towers, while Carl and 5 of his henchmen were in a chamber in the other tower. From that room, there was a direct line of sight down into the room where the cheating trio was holding their meeting. It had cost us $500 for the room clerk to assign a room on this side of the building, and it was a room that was plainly visible from where Carl was located. It was reported by Carl's operatives that those 5 bills vanished from the counter in a manner faster than the human eye could track. It would take a few seconds to complete the reservation. A computer console was all that the clerk was required to perform. In all likelihood, he believed that it was the least difficult money he had ever made in his whole life. In close proximity, only a few hundred feet distant from the space occupied by Laura, there were 3 cameras that Carl had set up to record the activity taking place in the room across the road. He informed me that there was a likely possibility they would have something to record, according to the studies he had observed. Individuals located in high-rise buildings had an innate perception that their height and perceived distance from other structures provided them with a high degree of invisibility. This perception had been confirmed in a number of situations he had overseen. He stated that even if they closed the shades, Carl's boys had laser-based technology that would be able to see the minute vibrations of the window over there and the sounds made by the 3 partygoers over there. He claimed this even on the condition that they closed the blinds and only a recording of their voices would be available to us. There is no video, but if there were one, it would be of high enough quality to ensure that the speakers could be identified in court. It was something that had been perfected during the Cold War and was utilized by intelligence organizations from both the West and Russia in order to spy on one another, according to Carl of the Russian Federation. The chat that took place over the phone was also intended to be recorded without a doubt. I was going to give Laura a call and make one final effort on my end to convince her to stop cheating on me and come back to me. On the other hand, from the perspective of my attorney, it was nothing more than a screenplay that had been produced, but I was holding out hope that it may be successful. When I moved my body, I could feel both hot flushes and icy chills chasing each other around in a frantic manner. My mind was filled with a variety of conflicting feelings that chased around in a manner very similar. I had no idea what I was experiencing. All I knew was that I was in pain. Despite the fact that I hadn't consumed anything throughout the entire day, I felt ill to my stomach. I was left at home by Carl and his people, but I was able to obtain a view of the event through the cameras. They hired a private investigator to keep an eye on them, almost watching them in every way. Inside the aircraft, there is a steward who is handing them miniature bottles of blue. They had already been blown away by the wind, by 3 sheets. As I spoke into the webcam on the mobile phone, I addressed Laura. As I looked over, I noticed that Laura was lying on the bed with her knees and elbows on the ground, while Brian was standing behind her. In order for her to reach the phone that was sitting on the nightstand, she had to wriggle her body and extend about. Kathy, who was standing behind Brian, was taking pleasure in the angry words that she was uttering into her mobile phone. Upon hearing my voice, she separated herself from Brian and Kathy and moved away from them. "Teresa, please, honey, do not have sexual relations with me," I repeated. It was almost as if I had forgotten to mention the man's name. It would be necessary for me to view it. It wasn't that I was expected to know his name just yet. I was unable to let Laura know about her. Each and every action was being stealthily observed. "Come back to me, my sweetheart, we beg you, please, we are able to discover a solution." I made an effort to come across as reassuring as I possibly could. This is the term that my attorney wanted me to use in my document. This was done with the intention of demonstrating Laura's complete lack of faithfulness and apathy. "Please, keep Elisa in your thoughts, Laura. Imagine what it will be like for her if we end up damaging our marriage. It is remarkable how long a man can continue to have hope even while he is witnessing the destruction of something wonderful right in front of his eyes." I had a deep affection for Laura. I had high hopes that I would be able to witness anything that would inspire me to have hope. In spite of this, there was absolutely no hope. It's possible that I love her. I had not yet acquired the ability to refrain from doing so. However, I definitely did not like her at all this very instant. In fact, Almost immediately, she confirmed that she did not detest it. "Stupid of you." Within the phone, Laura let out a scream. "I've expressed this to you before, you idiot. I am not having sexual relations with anyone, and I have had enough of your damn intrusions into my life." In response to the deceit, I could only shake my head. How could she say that? She was right there, naked with the man she had been with and would be with again. After I hung up, I couldn't believe how two-faced she was. She was silent for a bit. On TV, I saw her move closer to her friends, watching them. "But I'll tell you this, dear," she finally said, sounding like she was sharing a secret. "I might just go find some guy down on the street tonight and bring him to my room. How about that, love? Would that make you happy? I'd do it just so you can be right for once. How's that sound, dear?" The nastiness in her voice shocked me. This was the same woman who, a year ago, needed to be held all night after her favorite cat died. I used to think of Laura as this warm, comforting person in my bed, someone I could go to with anything, and a loving partner when our baby was asleep. "Laura," I said, feeling shaky. "I don't know what to say. I don't know why you want to mess up our lives this way. Think about what this will do to Elisa." "For heaven's sake, Laura," I was cut off by a loud yell. "Go to hell, and take her with you," she screamed. She was almost too mad to make sense. I only got what she was saying because I could see her mouth moving on the screen. "You jerk. We're going to sort this out when I get back, and you'd better hope I don't leave you for good." Got that? She yelled some more stuff I couldn't make out, even though I could see her mouth. She hit the off button and tossed the cell phone at the bed. It missed and ended up somewhere between the bed and the wall. She stumbled over to the bed and told Brian to get ready. Once more, Carl and his group removed every piece of equipment, packed it up, and shipped it back on Sunday morning. They boarded a plane and fell asleep, exhausted, all the way home. My lawyer was overburdened with evidence, including photographs, videos, phone conversations, and bank records. He would file for divorce by Monday at noon. After that, he had 6 months to go over all the evidence before the state would simply nod and immediately grant my divorce. We made use of a crystal-clear video that showed my wife, through an open window, cursing at me and our daughter while arguing with another man. We also took pictures to document what we observed. We included recordings from our house cameras that demonstrated my wife's disregard for our daughter Alice. These included instances when she stormed out and Alice chased after her, when she became irrationally angry, and when she told Alice to prepare her own breakfast because she was too busy. By early Monday, a judge had seen all of this. In order to give me temporary sole custody until a family court judge could review the case, the judge decided to keep my wife away from Alice. A further review was authorized, and my wife's relationship with Alice was to be withheld. A few more things were approved without any issues. Having wealth and influence undoubtedly expedites tasks. I was adding to the wealth of my lawyer. It was hard work at the accounting firm on Monday mornings. A lot of people enjoyed drinking a lot, some even began on Friday night and continued until Sunday night. The majority of people at work were just chatting by the coffee shop or doing nothing at their desks until the drinkers calmed down. A few women watched the tall man in the gray suit come in from the hallway shortly after lunchtime, but he didn't seem to mind. He kept his eyes on a picture he was holding, then on the faces of all the women. He soon found the person he was searching for. She was speaking quietly to a tall, intelligent man in his 40s and a shorter, skinny man who was leaning in close to her when he suddenly appeared in front of her. She appeared upset and was making an effort to avoid him. Her worried gaze was dark. She was making herself pay attention to what her supervisor had to say. The tall man said in a deep voice, "Laura Archer?" He had ambushed the trio with stealth. The female pivoted and gave a nod. She wasn't feeling well today. She was obviously bothered by something, judging by her expression. She saw as the man reached into his coat and withdrew a thick envelope. "You, madam," he uttered loudly to ensure he had everyone's attention. Setting down his briefcase, he produced a stack of thin, onion skin-like legal papers with a thicker baby blue paper behind them. He handed Laura another stack of papers and said, "This is a copy of the divorce request filed this morning. Mr. Mark Archer wants to end the marriage as soon as he can." Laura was shocked. He handed her more papers and said, "This, madam, is a court order that says you can't be within 1,000 feet of the house you and Mr. Archer lived in. This is a court order that says you can't talk to Mr. Archer's daughter, one Alisario Archer, at all. You can't call, email, write, or try to talk to Miss Archer in any way." "Got it, ma'am?" Laura did not say anything. It was evident that she was shocked. A large group of people gathered around Mr. Archer. "The big man informed me that 2 hours ago, all of the credit cards that you two had shared were canceled. Both of your bank accounts were closed as well. You get half of what was in those accounts," he said, holding up a check to make it appear soiled before handing Laura Archer the other documents. The big man looked at Laura, who was crying now, coldly. "Mr. Archer also says he's packing all your stuff right now. It'll be put in a truck soon. Your things will be in storage. You can get them when you want. Just call Mr. Archer's lawyer using the number on this card. You can't go back to the house you shared, new locks, new security code." He saw someone making an effort to go covertly. "Mr. R, wait up." He knocked on Brian's hand, gave him another envelope, and called. "Good news," he declared. He gave Brian another stack of papers and said, "You're in the middle of Archer's divorce." It appeared as though Brian would faint, and he had to hold onto a desk to keep from falling. "You're also sued by Mr. Archer as of today and maliciously interfering in the marriage between Mark Archer and Laura Archer, and that you have been carrying on a slim, ugly, sordid little affair with the former Mrs. Archer." "My attorney didn't believe that," the large man said, glancing over to see Laura's supervisor. He approached to give him a formal notice. That morning, a claim was made alleging that the company had disregarded its own guidelines regarding acceptable behavior at work and that Mark Archer should be reimbursed. Higher-ups received the same notice in the opulent office space from a top boss who was aware of the problems from the beginning. From a distance, I felt nothing. I felt icy cold, and my heart froze over. I remained silent close to the entrance where the lawyer entered. In order to give my wife the check and other things, I had given him extra money. Honestly, it wasn't his job. I watched Laura realize she had made a huge mistake when she collapsed to the ground. I went through the big doors and out. I watched my soon-to-be ex-wife come into the opulent conference space. I was seated in front of the lengthy table, close to the windows. She had to squint to see my face because it was hidden by the bright sun. I was sitting in a big boss chair, trying not to show my emotions, but I was good at hiding them. I had practiced a lot. Laura said uncertainly, "I wanted to see you before the lawyers did." She drew in a chair and took a seat. She had moved back in with her brother and lost her job about 4 months prior. Her auburn hair was nearly as long as before. When she first started working at the finance company, she had cut it shorter because she felt it looked more professional and sharp. She moved awkwardly and appeared thin. It appeared that she had not been getting enough sleep or food. Her eyes had dark circles under them. I tried not to show how much my heart was hurting for her. I was wearing my professional, tough boss face. Usually, it was quite rigid. "And you're here now?" I quietly questioned her. She did not look at me as she nodded. Then she had to turn to face me. "Mark," she muttered. I said nothing. "I want to say I am so sorry for what I did to you and our little girl. I know it's not enough, and it doesn't fix the pain I caused, but it's all I can say," quietly she replied. "Mark, I'm hurting too," she remarked. After a long period of silence, I said, "I can't understand why I did what I did, and it's making me go mad." "I'm hurting too," I stated directly. Laura began to sob quietly. "You don't know what hurt is, Laura, until you have to tell a 3-year-old that her mom might not come back. It's been 4 months since I told her, Laura, and she still cries at night. Only lately can I make her smile a bit. I stopped watching Laura cry more in her seat. She yells and fights anyone trying to stop her from running to me. If I leave her for too long, quietly replied, she's scared I won't come back. Can you think how scary that is for a little girl, Laura? Can you? I attempted to unwind in my chair as Laura began to cry. I watched Laura cry for a little while longer, trying to make myself sound better than I actually felt. She's in a new daycare here at work. I had to make one so I'd never be too far away again. She panics when she can't find me. The work moms here are doing better than ever, and it's almost paid for itself. She didn't respond. I held out. Laura just shook her head and started crying. Why, I said as softly as I could, why did you do it, Laura? I loved you more than anything, and you tore my heart out. There's a big hole in me now, Laura. I can't start to fill it until I know. Why? Her lack of makeup suggests that she anticipated crying. Compared to when we were married, she looked even more stunning at 30. Seeing her cry broke my heart. I was also in the mood to cry. As a teenager, I lost my younger brother in an automobile accident. I didn't know how to put things right, and I felt worse now than I did then. I reasoned that the pain might never go away. After some time, she said, I don't know why. She said nothing, saying, maybe I'm crazy. Quietly, Mark, I can't take back what I did. She muttered, I won't ask, and I don't deserve your forgiveness. I hurt the only man I'll ever love so much I have to live with that pain forever, and I don't know what to do. I wish I was gone when I think of what I did to our little girl when I hear myself on that night yelling at you to take her away with you, she said while still weeping. When I was trying to bring up the DVD player in the corner, I almost used the remote control that was beside my hand. However, I did not consult the list of bookmarks that was on the disc. I was aware of which one was the scene in which this woman, who was naked and intoxicated, was beating her own daughter to hell. I did not do it because it appeared to be superfluous. It would appear that she already had ample knowledge about it. Following a period of time, her weeping ceased and slowed down. I was under the impression that she was probably too dehydrated to cry anymore. I placed the remote control in one of the upper drawers of the credenza that was located close. Do you think I should see a psychologist or a counselor? She said sluggishly. I'm trying to figure out why I was so responsible for destroying our lives and causing so much pain to so many other people. As well, her fingers connected to each other in a manner resembling that of a multitude of serpents. My desire is to meet with Stacy Collier. She took a risk. Please accept my apologies for the harm that I have caused to her family. Regarding me, she was kind. Laura pondered the situation, but I have no idea why. Immediately in front of her, she fixed her gaze on the grain that was embedded in the hard tabletop. It is she, I was told by Stacy, that Brian was able to find a woman at his place of employment on a regular basis for a period of time. She claimed that she had been accustomed to it, but that she has finally reached her breaking point. Brian is getting a divorce, and she is already moving on with her life, having met a man who is interested in her, who loves her children, and who she considers to be the best thing that has ever happened to her. She is ecstatic. I knew Stacy, I knew she was divorcing her husband, I knew about the new men in her life, but I had no idea Laura had gone to Stacy and apologized. That said something about her willingness to own up to her mistakes and feel regret for what she had done. Something good started to seep out of me, and I wondered if it could last and grow. How is the doctor offering you advice? We have not made any progress, Laura acknowledged when I asked about it. If I could tell you that we had, I would do anything, she said, quickly retreating to the table's surface as soon as she saw me. Still, all I know for sure right now is that something happened during the time I was drinking so much there. Are you currently taking any medication? Laura suddenly spoke out, cutting off whatever it was that she was trying to say. For the very first time, she looked up at me and stared into my eyes while holding my gaze in hers. I was unable to decipher the tumultuous array of feelings that were chasing each other across her face. No, I am not sure, it was finally her admission. It could be the very first time that it's possible that she stopped swallowing so forcefully. The very first time I actually did it when I had my first sexual encounter with Brian. It's true, I was in a terrible state of intoxication, she said, her head lowering again. I wasn't even intoxicated any longer, she added. She began crying again, trying not to cry too much. It would be nice if I could use that reason, she muttered. Still, I do not. I am trying to find the real reasons why this is happening. I am talking to my counselor about it. The only time she spoke again was when I shifted in the chair. It's Mark, I said, raising my eyebrows and lifting my chin in a questioning manner. Would you be willing to visit her? She wants to talk to you, but she wants to hear your thoughts first. She just wants to ask you a couple of questions. The words Laura said were a rushing tension that slammed into each other before I started ranting. She was trying to take everything in before I started. She would like to inquire about some things and see if she can discover anything further, but I haven't been able to convey that to her. It's possible, Laura said, staring at me askantly when I stated directly, It's Lee, is that you? With a tone full of emotion, she asked. I shrugged. Your husband is still you, right? I was about to say, my child, but I refrained. Her eyes glowed with an unexpected hope that grew stronger with time. I started to say something, hoping to convince her that there was no real chance of success, but I stopped short. For the sake of my little daughter, I was willing to investigate virtually any possible course of action that would be beneficial to her without any reservations. I told her in a serious tone. As long as it does not put our child in danger, I will do all in my power to assist you. I had loved Laura very much, and I still loved her. Love is not like a spigot, it cannot be turned on or off at will. Love, on the other hand, could not overcome the senses. A deep sense of betrayal overcame me. That was the course of action fate had in store for us if we were about to file for divorce. Finally, after 6 months of waiting, it was over. During and after the divorce, I did not stop my ex-wife from coming to visit me when my daughter was here. This is untrue. Laura tried to make amends multiple times, but the result was not what I wanted. I was in so much pain that I had no choice but to get help from a professional. It was really helpful to me. To make more time for my daughter, I reduced the number of hours I worked. Laura relocated the following year and wed an accountant in that location. My daughter was involved in the marriage. Despite being invited, I declined to attend the event. I chose to dedicate my entire life to being a mother to my daughter and never got married again. Kindly share your thoughts about my story in the comment section below. Hi there. Please feel free to forward these contents to your friends and family if you find them useful. In addition, as is customary, if you like this video, please click the like button to support our podcast in reaching a larger audience on YouTube, as the platform favors videos with a high number of likes. You might also think about becoming a subscriber to the channel so you can be notified whenever I post something new. YouTube will let you know as appropriate. I appreciate your help, and I hope you have an amazing day.